we are going to now go straight into our panel discussion. I am going to ask Mr. Muimeleli to come back to the podium. And I will also like to ask Ms. Ndoni to come so that we can bombard them with as many questions as we like for a certain number of time. I think we have 45 minutes for the session. Yes, we do. So please ask questions. What we're going to be dealing with now is there are factors such as organizational culture, language, and the perception of discrimination, serious hurdles along the path of researcher development. What is the role of mentorship and counseling? So all the questions that you would have had before, this is the time that I would ask you to raise them. There's no need for a roaming mic. There's mics that are enabled there by your workstations. Do we have any, maybe let me take questions from previous, do we have questions for this particular round? Debbie? Let me start with 3 and then allow them to answer and then have a conversation. The other thing that I would also encourage is that, like I had indicated previously, this particular discussion, if you feel the need to add more onto what another speaker has said, please feel the need to do that. Let's have as many discussion points as we can give forward so that we can have these recommendations. Debbie, I'll start with, so it'll be 1, 2 you, sir, and 3.
Okay, this is quite an odd situation in that I'm representing some people. We were sitting, there's a group of students over there that we were busy discussing during lunch, and not through my own willingness, they've asked me just to represent them in terms of some questions that they have, which they will add on. I still want to ask why you wanted me to represent you. Okay.
This will go into one of the C's that he was speaking about, communication. Maybe you are a better communicator.
That's exactly what they said, that they didn't feel that they're the So they were speaking about, and please let me know if I go off track at all. They were speaking about one of the things that attracted them to the specific topic were the career paths for researchers and what that actually meant. And they said, just off the top of their heads, when they think about their own pathways in terms of various routes, they said, okay, first there's academia, second maybe sales. Most of them came from the biotechnology environment. Sales, so pharma, biotechnology, and they said also when they went into all of this, you would see on TV, they were kind of sold a dream that wasn't the reality, that you see CSI, but that doesn't exist in South Africa. In fact, what they learned was that the markets that they are working for in terms of their degrees, and there's a majority of postgrads and doctorate students in that group, and they said, South Africa does not have the markets we need to do our work. So I asked them, what about entrepreneurship? And they said they don't have those models. No one's showing them where to go in terms about, incubation processes, how they can actually develop a business. But beyond that, one of their biggest barriers, particularly in their fields of biotechnology, is that there's a lot of certification. There's a lot of areas you have to tick boxes if you go into that specific field. It's not as simple as opening a business. So ultimately they were saying there doesn't seem to be a lot of R&D potential in South Africa. There are all these multinationals that exist here. But all their R&Ds outside of South Africa, they said they have a better job, they have a better chance to get a good job outside of South Africa than inside. South Africa does not have the industries that support what they want to do. People don't want to leave. Their families are here, they've invested in South Africa, but they feel that unless they choose a job in which they are absolutely overqualified for, they cannot remain in South Africa. And then they spoke about multilateral agreements. They hear about these agreements that are done in terms of exchanges between countries. And it's all very well, you know, about the doctors and about IT. They said, what about considering their fields when it comes to multilateral agreements? That they can actually follow on and learn and go into R&D areas that that we don't have in South Africa. And then there were two very interesting comments that were made. The one was, well, three I should say. The one was that they believed that anyone who has done an undergrad BSc is not equipped for any work at all, not even entrepreneurship. The second thing they said, and I'm almost quoting here, we are told that education is our way out of poverty. And now we are realizing it's actually our way into a poverty because of the bills and everything that needs to be paid. And then the third and final comment that was made is, I am doing the most relevant research in my field, and this particular student was speaking about, he's working in groundbreaking nanotechnology with focusing on breast cancer as well. He said, I'm doing the most relevant research in my field. But when I'm done, where do I go? The only spaces that that actually have industries that I could work in are in Australia and Canada. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for those questions. Even though I do feel that you should have tried to raise them yourself. Even though I don't know what you are afraid of, but at least you should have tried. It sort of contributes to you building your confidence, etc. But we'll take them. I think the first thing was around communication and confidence. And I also do think that there are people who are studying communication as a qualification. So sometimes it's a bit unfair to expect someone to have this skill naturally when other people are studying for these things. And I think you appreciating it from that angle, it will sort of guide you to actually put in enough effort to accept that it won't come naturally, but for me to actually build on these skills, I might need to do some work. And doing some work might mean, if you're at a university, there are debating societies or public speaking societies, and actually spend a bit of time there. And then in terms of jobs and career paths for researchers, I like to look at when you are studying a particular qualification. Yes, you will understand the subject matter of that particular qualification, but it's important to also recognize the other skills that you're able to pick up, in that particular journey of getting that particular qualification. There are certain, more especially with the postgraduate qualification, you know that once you obtain a postgraduate qualification, you understand research methodologies, so you know how to get information. That's one. Two, you understand the tools of analysis, so you know how to analyze stuff. You know how to write, that's why you wrote that particular thesis and whatnot. So isolating those different skills that you picked up in your journey and seeing what kind of industries are some of those skills valued. And you might realize that you actually have more and more companies that you can apply for. Or you'll realize that there's quite a lot of value that you can add in different organizations if you are able to isolate the different skills that you are able to pick up in your journey of getting your qualification. And then in terms of, and I think that also feeds into the BSc question. And then just to add on that as well, entrepreneurship. Okay, I'm in business full time, and the entrepreneurship ecosystem in South Africa. I don't work for government, but I think they are really trying. If you look at institutions such as your NYDA, your CEDAS, etc., I know personally of a lot of young people who have benefited from these institutions. Some didn't even have university qualifications. So I think there are quite a lot of agencies and government support that's available. But the gap is they don't sort of advertise enough or communicate what they offer to an extent that maybe almost everyone is aware. But I think if you go out of your way to actually try to find out, you'll then realize that there's a significant amount of support available. I mean, one of my businesses has benefited from IDA, another one has benefited from CEDA, and it's quite the kind of support that I felt I needed. And I think, lastly, the multinational agreement. I think this one is not different from the other comment that was made earlier about collaboration agreements. To say with most institutions, that's where they end. Organizations just meet, they sign, they have a nice party, but there are no initiatives that accompany most of those agreements. And then we were lucky to actually, for example, with the Malaysia trip, and we were lucky to actually realize that, okay, with some agreements, there are actually programs that you can apply for. So with some of these things, they are available, but they won't come to you when you're just sitting. You need to go out of your way to actually look for some of those things. And then if you have picked up a skill as a researcher, you should be able to sort of try to find that particular information. I'm not saying, at the other end, I'm not defending government, because I feel like they should also do a lot in terms of ensuring that knowledge or information is circulating in different communities. And I think that would be my contribution with regard to those questions. Thanks.
Thank you for speaking on behalf of them. That's very sweet of you and very well articulated. But also, what a sad deal. It sounds like it. But it's actually not that bad. I think there's a whole lot of pressure, especially when we start speaking about entrepreneurship as academics and as scientists. I think the concept of entrepreneurship, we're all not going to come up with the spaceship or something that's going to sell millions for us. No, that's not going to be for us. But I think what we need to understand about entrepreneurship is, how do you sell yourself? That is the most important thing that you need to know as a scientist. Be it in the way that you write your research and your academics, you need to understand that if you had to meet the CEO of Investec and you had to sit here and you're a scientist, how do I make him interested in what I'm selling or what I'm doing in my research? So science communication is the biggest thing that you guys need to focus on, because we're not taught to communicate it. We're just taught to sit in the lab and do our experiments and write this article for our supervisor and his friends, and then it comes back read and we carry on writing it. So we need to, first of all, the people that you associate yourself with is very important. I love scientists, but I don't have many scientist friends. I have a lot of people that are in accounting and business, and that's the first thing to do, is that which are the industries that when they come out of the undergraduate degree, they get a job? And why do they get a job? So as soon as you come out of your accounting degree, you get a job somewhere. You might be making $1 million, but you'll go to KPMG, you'll go somewhere. You come out, you're a CA, you'll get a job somewhere. Why is it that they need it? Because they understand some kind of language, and it's how to sell, how does money work, how do you invest. So understand the full picture of your research. That's the first thing. And secondly, most importantly, get out of the pressure that I should be coming up with a business, I should be doing this. Just get into, what does it mean to be an entrepreneur, and how do I take my research and be able to sell it? How do I simplify it? So example was, I went to this training in business, and they said, okay, Ncunu, what is your research topic? And I was like, checking out evaluating the climate resilience and variability in food production and scale, and what the effects of scale and diversification. Hectic. Then this guy was like, no, break it down for me. And I said, well, he told me, what are you doing? And I told him, and the summary of my thing was, we're trying to find what is the right food to plant at the right time, at the right temperature. That's it. And that's the language that we as scientists need to understand, that you can't talk like a scientist in everywhere that you go. So even if you want to start a business, even if you want to get into entrepreneurship, even if you want to make your research or make yourself relevant, they're not going to find you relevant if you're not communicating yourself right. I hope so.
So maybe to touch on those 4 C's, critical thinking, creativity, collaborations, and communication. So if you don't know, I think maybe the speakers were also making sure that even though that government is not, there aren't any platforms that are saying that this is what we do, please come to us. Try as hard as you can to look for those places in which you can achieve deliverables that are not necessarily in your particular space. For example, if your institution or government does not give you funding, try to go to TIA and actually ask for their funding, or the Youth Development Agency, or many opportunities that are available to us, instead of just sitting in our corners and let's try harder maybe to look for the opportunities that can be availed to us. I will also take the two questions and maybe the third one in that order, and then I will afford them time to answer. And if there's anybody who also wants to add on maybe let me allow her to add on and then take the two questions. You can add on to what the panelists are discussing.
Okay, just to the thing.
Or maybe just also for record, please state your name so that we can just minute it as well.
Okay, my name is Angwe Rachel from the Northwest University. Just to add on the postgraduate mentorship. I've been a postgraduate student for a while now, and one thing I come to realize is when it comes to postgraduate mentoring, just to add on, even when the students are kind of done with their projects and stuff, I think they still need, because like, especially in an academic milieu, what they do, it's all about writing, publishing, writing and publishing, writing and publishing. So it's just like you sitting there, like you having a lot of articles, it feels like maybe you paid out or something. But coming out of that particular arena, you feel so stupid, because it's like a big fish, like kind of a big fish in a small pond. Coming out there, especially like a doctorate student, for example, after completing your doctoral work, then maybe your supervisor do not have like a post-doctoral for you, you become so frustrated. You don't know what to do, you don't know where to go, you don't know who to speak to, because it's like in a lot of situations, it's very few situations where a student gets the opportunity to go to conferences, to present, to get to say themselves out there to the world. And even if you get that opportunity to go out there and present, it's maybe 1 or 2 conferences, just 1 or 2. And you get into that arena, you don't get to create much of a network around those that specialize around the same things that you specialize on. So at the end of the day, when you graduate and your supervisor can offer you a postdoctoral position, you sit there, for example, ICT I directed in July, you have a project, you have so many different things. Going through that process, you have so much in your head. You can't keep on focusing on the same issue that you've been focusing on in your doctoral studies. Maybe you want to take a little step further or bring in new ideas into what you've already got a background with. And now, because maybe it's a little bit out of space from what your supervisor is specializing on, it doesn't mean you working under him or her, you have to keep on specializing on the same thing. Maybe you've seen an opportunity where you want to grab it. It's very important. But focusing on her area of specialization, she does not focus on that. There is no funding for that. You have a very, very good project in your hand that will help the society, that will help the environment, that will create a difference in the world. How do you go about it? You sit there with a project, you don't know who to talk to. That's it. So do we keep those ideas? Do we keep those proposals, those projects that we have in hand? Do we let them die out? What do we do? That's just what I wanted to add on. And literally, I'm in the same situation.
Good afternoon. My name is Mashia Nemotohani. I'm from Sambi. I would have actually loved to ask this question immediately after the speaker has spoken. However, it's okay, we can proceed. My question is directed to Mr. Matungwa. Let me start by saying your presentation was actually quite very great and very inspiring. However, I need to ask you this question because in music there's something we call it symphony. Listening to the previous speakers to where we are, this question has been coming through. On your second slide, if I'm not mistaken, relating to the postgraduate, why South Africans are doing postgraduate or are not doing postgraduate. You made some gross generalizations as far as I could hear from what you were saying. One of them, you actually said that they do postgraduate because they have nothing to do, or as just an afterthought. Now the question comes into mind is to say, on what basis are these made? Because I think it's problematic. The DTI representative in the morning mentioned that South Africans are lazy. The NRF representative here tried to answer the question why South Africans are not finishing their postgraduate degrees in time versus the international students. Please clarify, on what basis are you making such a statement? Because I think it fits into the wrong narrative. If you did a study, what study? How big was your sample? How authentic was that? That was my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. My name is Seth Fabian from the University of Pretoria. This is off the back of what Debbie was talking about, and thank you, Ms. Ncunu and Mr. Matungwa, for your excellent talks. It's wonderful to hear your insights. It goes along the topic of the employability of the BSc undergraduate, well, graduate, and what is it, or how would one go about implementing skills within their curriculum to make them more employable? Things like entrepreneurship. If we have, we spoke a lot about the triple helix this morning. If we have government and academia buying in, but there is no industry to link that to, how do we expect to implement something like that in this country? And so perhaps implementing entrepreneurship into an undergraduate BSc course could lend itself to people starting up industries that could be empowered by a triple helix agreement. So that's my question. And if anyone else in the room has insights to add to that, please do. Thank you.
My name is Malvin Chabalala from the University of Pretoria. Just generally, the issue that we were raising with Debbie was frustration as students, where you don't know what's next. Because as you mentioned, that if you're an accounting engineer, a lawyer, you know where you're going after you graduate at whatever level that you're at. But as a science student, a postgraduate, you're not quite sure. You're only left with alternatives. As you mentioned now, entrepreneurship is an alternative. Whatever it is, scientific writing is an alternative. I did not study scientific writing. I studied pharmacology. I would like to go and work as a pharmacologist. But we're now left with a bunch of alternatives. So my question then is that then the reality of a science student in this country, where after you're done doing good research, applying yourself and doing well, is your reality that you're left with alternatives, and those are entrepreneurship and everything else you've learned along the way in your degree? Is that then what's happening? Is that the answer to our question?
Thank you for that question. So I'm going to direct these questions as follows. The First Lady and the second gentleman spoke. The First Lady spoke a lot about supervisors. And it brings me back to when I was at lunch, I kept asking people what are the challenges that they are facing in their particular environment. And they spoke mostly about how supervisors are the ones who are supposed to be knowledgeable in a particular field, and what happens when they're not as knowledgeable as you, for example, if you supersede. And another one, when they spoke about supervisors, they spoke about how what happens when, and we've often seen when supervisors spread themselves too thin, and how it becomes a challenge then to have the attention in which is needed in order for you to progress in your field. So I think it touches a little bit also on mentorship, so I'm going to ask you to answer that. The second question was from Mr. Motopane, who was asking you for the basis of the statement. I'll also ask you to answer that one. And then the last two is going to be directed at Ms. Ndoni regarding the employability of a BSc student and how, as you know, he spoke about a lot of things about regarding how are you supposed to implement entrepreneurship when you did not learn it in school particularly. And the last speaker as well, who spoke about now what other alternatives are there. Is it now where you are supposed to only get the scraps? Did I summarize it correctly? No? Yes?
I wasn't asking for alternatives. I was asking if that's the reality, that we're only left with alternatives as science students.
Perfect. She heard you. Let me start with the first two, then the last two.
All right. The first question with regard to supervisors, I think the lady mentioned quite a key concept of networking. So networking is also something that is unfair to assume that someone would naturally have it, but it's also a skill that can be learned, and for those who are interested in learning it, they need to sort of invest some time doing that. And it comes very handy, more especially when you attend conferences and whatnot. Then you are able to sort of meet different people who are not working in the same topic as you, but who are able to supervise a wide range of topics. And if your supervisor is obviously sort of struck, if the work of your supervisor is not necessarily in line with what you want to do, you can propose some of those people that you have met to your supervisor as co-supervisors, and most supervisors will be open to that particular idea. So it basically comes back to you taking charge of what is it that you are willing to do to get your qualification. And if networking and writing to different supervisors across the globe and writing to some of them to say, can they co-supervise you if your supervisor is struggling, you might find yourself in a situation where you actually have supervisors who are able and willing to supervise the kind of work that you are working on. And this also speaks to even when you are done. My master's and my PhD are in totally two different topics. And it's because of me networking while I was doing my master's and meeting people who are doing other things in the PhD level. And that's how I was able to get supervisors who are interested in supervising things that I'm interested in that are not necessarily in line with what I did in my master's level. So I think the answer there is literally working on networking skills. And then secondly, the frustration there with my brother. I think you are the one who's very right. This stereotype is wrong, but you also need to understand where we come from. So, for example, at the Center for Emerging Researchers, beginning of the year, late Feb, that's when you get most students who are now reaching out to us, saying, can you assist me with getting a supervisor? Can you assist me with funding? And then when you ask, where have you been all this time? The answer is always the same. I thought I was going to get a job, I didn't get it, and now I want to do postgraduate. I thought I was going to do this, I thought I was going to get this opportunity, I didn't get it, and now I want to do this. And I think it's one of those things that now feeds to us making such statements. And it's a bigger problem. So when we run, for example, university readiness workshops that we do with high school students, we encourage those who are still going to first year to say, have an exit strategy to say, start from first year, start thinking about what is it that you want to do post-varsity. And when you start, if a student says, I think I want to do postgrad, or I think I want to start working, we said, okay, so your qualification that you're going to get becomes one of the things that you need to get for you to see yourself there. But what are other skills? Oh, okay, I think I need to be able to communicate better. I think I need to have this kind of communication skills. I need to have this kind of leadership skills. And so that then speaks to the program or other skills that that particular student needs to start working on as they are running as as they are getting their qualification, and they stand a better chance of achieving that particular exit strategy that they've been thinking of since first year. But we also say, if you don't get that, what's the second choice? So it's a bigger problem that a lot of students, when they start thinking about life post-varsity after graduation. And it becomes very difficult for them to actually find something to do that is in line with what they want to do when they are only thinking about it at that particular point in time. So I apologize for making that statement, sir. And I hope these kind of workshops, or there could be more guidance given to our learners as they enter institutions of higher learning, to avoid them getting in situations where they end up taking postgraduate opportunities simply because they cannot, or they are failing to get other opportunities that they thought they were going to get. Thank you.
Thank you for the great question. When we speak about employability, I think it's a deeper issue than just the sciences. It's actually a general country problem we have. And I think Sizwe Ncunu, when he started a school, Future Nations, the issue of employability starts from primary and how you are taught to solve problems. So if you're asking if we need to have entrepreneurship, I think entrepreneurship is a word that's just used very loosely when people speak about employability. I think what they're really trying to say is creative thinking. How are we being taught to think critically and creatively within your sector, in all sectors? It doesn't mean now you need to go start a business, no, but you need to actually understand what is it that makes my research noble, which is actually at a PhD level, but most importantly, that should be taught from the time that you're an undergrad. So the way in which I think you can make yourself employable is to show that you can critically think, is to show that you're a creative thinker. So even if it means that the way in which you're solving a water issue is not the same that the way that everyone is, maybe you're not just doing it with scientific researchers, but you went and found water engineering companies and ask them, hey, what are the issues that you have in your organization, in your company? As a scientist, these are the skills that I can come up in, and how's about we partner in my research? And then in that way, you're actually becoming more creative in that you're not just sitting there with your supervisor writing your research, but you went and found other people in your sector that are making money out of what you are studying, and then you're aligning yourself within those gaps. I hope I answered your question. Somewhat. In terms of alternatives, yes, you always have to think of alternatives. Whether you are married and you want to stay in Durban North and you never know what's going to happen in the next 5 years, you always have to think of alternatives in terms of your life generally. In terms of the science career, I would say the problem that we have is we have not been exposed to the different industries in science that you can go in. That's because we are being taught to think like this. We are not being taught that as a scientist, you are learning how to read an article and analyze an article. That's not what you write on your CV. You write, I'm a BSc student in chemical engineering. So, what else did you learn? Did you learn how to write up? Did you learn how to project manage people because you managed your supervisor and you managed your your calls, your writing team, your authors? That is project management. So you need to understand what are these industries and what do they say. I love Dr. Phil Joyner, the DCI DDG. He is now the DDG. He's a qualified chemical engineer, but he's a DDG. So in all of these organizations, even if you start in even the NSTF or the DSI, and understand, what is this scientist doing in this position? They're not publishing articles. They are doing something. They're doing an executive thinking, a strategist, a grant holder manager. All of those positions, we don't even think about them. We don't even target them because we don't think of ourselves outside of publishing articles. So you need to understand, in my science industry, who is it that moved out of the sciences and worked? If you look at Dr. Judy Dlamini, she's a medical doctor, but now she's the vice chancellor of WITS. So how did she become the vice chancellor? Did she publish articles? No. What are the skills that she learned while she was running Aspen? Do you understand? I don't know if I'm helping you, you know, but you need to understand what are the skills and how do you put them in a way that makes someone say, I want you to head up this thing, or I want you in this division. And then what are all these scientists? There are plenty of scientists in DSI that aren't publishing. They're working as executives, as advisors. How did they get there? And that's the stuff that we need to understand ourselves in. How do we place ourselves? And in these alternatives, how am I prepping myself to be the right one for that position? Yeah.
Can we have another round of hands? What? No. Oh. We can also have those hands. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we'll have a discussion. Yeah. A little bit. Just increase the volume. That way.
No, like raise your voice. That volume.
Okay, is the mic?
No, it's not a. Oh, Kagalo Twisafo.
So a lot of the problems that we see, that I've also heard from the students that have spoken now and that we've seen in our company, we get a lot of emails from students that can't get jobs and so forth. Is a lack of communication to the students when they start out in university and when they, as they ask, are there any alternatives? Is there not a clear-cut kind of job that we can do? So I was wondering whether maybe the NSDF might be a good vehicle for this kind of communication. Maybe form some kind of a portal online where the landscape of employers and companies that are working in science can register just to show what kind of companies are working in the sector, what kind of jobs are available, where the students can also log on, and so that the companies on the other hand can have an idea of what the landscape of students studying in a specific sector looks like. So I just think there's a lack of clear communication to the students. I was also in the same position in a genetics degree. I just saw the academic line going forward, continuing with masters, then PhD, then postdoc, and then what. So I'm just suggesting that maybe the NSDF, I know they have on their website links to bursaries and things like that, but maybe they can also include links to career opportunities and what kinds of things scientists, undergrads, who will become postgrads need in order to become employable, and where they can start looking for opportunities and what skills they still need to acquire. Just as a suggestion.
Thank you for that suggestion. Yancy will note that. Can we have the second question or suggestion or comment?
Thank you. It's not a question on my side. I think I'm going to add some points on what has been touched before, based on the questions that were raised by the group of students in front here. I think the first point they mentioned was the employability of PhD and master students. The second part was the funding, project funding. And the third one was the entrepreneurship. So if I'm touching first the first part, the PhD employability, first of all, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Lubabalo Mafo. I'm from TIA, Technology Innovation Agency. PhD employability. Okay, let me first make this comment. I don't mean to offend you guys. When you are at your master's level or PhD level, we look at you in a different way. You are unlike someone who just completed a junior degree. You can bring something new on the table. If you still have a mindset of looking for a job but not creating one, then I say you need to really evaluate your PhD. Now, employability, as Ms. Ndoni mentioned before, if you have a technical skills and you are lacking experience, and you want to grow on the corporate, you need to supplement your technical skills by learning other skills that will market you. That is the first part. Now let's move to project funding. I think in this part, I think the research capacity development of universities is failing students because the focus is on researchers, which is lecturers. Lecturers, they do get money from TIA, a lot of money for their research, but they are failing to communicate the information to students. Hence, students, they don't know anything about TIA. There are so many opportunities from TIA for people who want to start businesses. I mean funding. First of all, what I would say, you need to understand as a person, what do you want? Do you want to work? Do you want to start a company? If you want to start a company, now take that initiative. Look for funds. TIA, they have plenty of funds, different disciplines. If you want information on TIA, I can supplement that information before I leave. Now, we've got different funds, your seed fund, rapid response fund. There are plenty of funds, guys, that you can apply for if you want to be a starter. Entrepreneurship, where I come from, I'm based in Durban. We incubate people who don't even know what they are doing. Can you imagine? We give them money. But we have people like you at universities who've got research, people who've got novel ideas. What you are doing, you are writing your ideas on paper and you are selling them away. If you haven't done that, you write theses, you pile them in libraries. You don't think about commercializing them. But if you can't think that way, who's going to think for you? Your lecturers, your supervisors are making a lot of money from NRF and TIA, but they are not making you aware of that. I challenge you today, go seek for these answers that I'm going to tell you. We talk of TIA, Invotech, how many, your DTI, there are plenty of funders that are distributing money for research in South Africa. And hence you are not taking advantage of that. If you go to universities, you will find tech stations, more especially for people who are more on technical background. Tech stations are positioned at universities. Why don't you go to those offices and ask those people, what are you doing, guys? Maybe your ideas might come around and you first think what I can do that will be in line with this. Or if I've got this idea, who do you know that can assist me to do this kind of work? All over the country, we've got tech stations, we've got platforms that are meant to incubate people who have received or not received funds from TIA and other funding agents. So your projects that you're doing at universities, yes, universities, if you publish, you wrote a patent on your project, they might want a certain portion of your IP. But if you want to go alone to your project, then register a company. Approach the university as a company to say, I want to do this project under the university, but under this company, not as a student. Then you source funds for your company and you go back. I will just make an example of someone that I have assisted. One lady came to us. She came to do this hair, formulation treatment. Then we assisted her. While she was there, she saw an opportunity to apply for funds at TIA. I assisted the lady and she managed to secure 800,000. What I said for what she was looking for, I told her, we don't have the facility to support you on this one. But I know of someone in Cape Town that specializes exactly on what you want to do. I suggest take this money, go to Cape Town and do this research. She's enrolled for her PhD studies on formulation chemistry. But if I can tell you, the product now that she's been researching, that is currently researching, they are produced by a Swiss company here in Pretoria. She's going to be selling to clicks. You're going to buy her products there. Are people who've got idea of what they want to do. Then if you need that information, go out there, challenge yourself, look for that information. and live your dream. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for those pearls of wisdom. In jealousy of time, I'm going to ask the next questionnaires to be short. We have a presentation that a lady is live streaming with us from the UK, so it is imperative that we are on time. The third question, or comment or suggestion?
I agree with the previous comments on entrepreneurship, but I also think it's time that the research community here in South Africa maybe look at a different paradigm. Are we producing too many PhDs for the market? Because not everybody is interested in entrepreneurship. And I also disagree at the NRF with the age limit, because oftentimes some of the best students that have the best ideas and want to come back and study and be productive are people that have actually been out in the workforce, and they have an idea what they want to do, and they're committed, rather than somebody that's maybe fumbling with an idea that's given to their supervisors. And in light of that, one other suggestion is there's a huge pressure on academics to take large number of students. Rather than taking quantity, we should really focus on quality. And again, not spreading ourselves too thin, but actually giving that mentorship that is so important. I know many students complain about the fact that they don't hear from their supervisors for 6 months. And the supervisors need to have some type of minimum standards and criteria in order to be a supervisor. It shouldn't just be something that comes with a post. Thank you.
Thank you. There was a fourth question. This is going to be the last question that I'm taking, unless if there's a burning question that an individual from the floor wants to ask, or comment or suggestion. One more burning, and then we will wrap this session up. Okay.
Okay, the first statement that I would just like to make is for starters, I'm Anita Engelbrecht from the South African National Space Agency. I'm not a researcher, so I'm a human resources manager for the Space Agency in Hermanus in the Western Cape. So the first statement that I would like to make is on Ms. Ncunu's thing where she mentioned that if you've got a BSc, don't just write that you've got a BSc. For starters, on a CV, take off your photograph, except they ask you for the photograph because you don't want to be judged before they've even looked at your CV. The second thing is on your CV, if you've done things like with us at the Space Agency, we give our students the opportunity, because we've got an on-site residence, so we've got students, although we're not a university, we give them the opportunity to do science outreach work. And all of those kind of things you put on your CV, because if I've sat with 2 CVs in front of me, and the only difference is that this person has written their one line, I answered the phone in reception, and the other CV doesn't have that, that might make the difference, because the person who answered the reception's telephone has had to deal with conflict, has had to deal with different kinds of people, has had to have the public speaking capabilities that other people might not have. The next thing is a question that I've got to Mr. Matungwa. From a research environment that I come from, is that you made the statement that you've got to start with end user research. What about your blue sky research? Is there still a place for it in South Africa, or is everything supposed to be applied sciences nowadays? Thanks.
Can we have the last question, and then we will wrap up the question session, or rather the discussion panel?
Thank you. I'm Naledi. I'm from TUT. It's not a question, it's a comment actually. I'd like to applaud our 2 speakers. They make postgraduate studies to be more vibey, more lively, more vibrant. And then I wish that we can have more platforms to discuss in that angle, and also have such programs also be expanded for more postgraduate students. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that comment. We only have one question, so I will allow you to answer that one.
No, thank you so much. I'm going to be very quick about this one. So there is space for basic research. But it must be informed by, because you do basic, so when you are doing applied research, you use the output from the basic research to do applied research while you are sort of testing it on a real life thing, right? So with the approach that we have sort of seen in different areas in the world that we've traveled to, we have realized that the gaps in the basic research are informed by what's missing when people are basically doing applied research. So it's people who are doing applied research who then say there are these gaps, and then those gaps are then filled by those who are interested in doing basic research. So it's still not basic research from a point of view of, from paper or, research questions from nowhere just because you are interested in a particular space, but it is done or conducted with the idea of the research output feeding into the applied research at the end of the day. So these two must speak to each other. Thank you.
Debbie, they will be available a little bit later, hopefully. Yes, maybe. If not, they have their contact details there. Oh, Debbie. To Ms. Ndoni and Mr. Matungwa, thank you so much for taking the time to bless us with those pearls of wisdom. There's so many. I think what we forget as scientists is to also remember that with our science, if we don't communicate it to anyone else, it just ends there. Or maybe to even reinvent, to see how best to implement most of these things that we've learned at school, to take it out and make sure that we are coming out across as best researchers in our field. Thank you for taking the time. From a young professional as well, I would like to say thank you very much, and please do accept our gifts of gratitude. Now, please give them a huge round of applause. Okay. Fun time. So the graveyard session was not so bad, was it? You see, I'm also on my tippy toes because I'm vertically inclined. So this is going to be the last presentation, and it will be from Professor Emanuela Toveda, and she is the Vice President of the Triple Helix Association. She will be joining us, and rather she will be presenting on measuring innovation ecosystem dynamics and the triple helix. She is, I think, joining us from the UK, right, Yancy? Yes. And it will be streamed live, so at least we are participating in 4IR, yes? I think the gentlemen are just setting up now. Will she be able to take questions, Yancy?
I don't know. We'll have to see if the connection is good.
Okay, so we will see if we will take questions. My calf muscles are killing me. Let's just wait for the technicians to actually just finish up here. What time is it? Yes, please do stretch. You can walk about in like your radius. Try not to leave the facility. We will allow stretching for like a couple of seconds. So that when she is streaming live, we are just not disrupting that, so that we can finish as well on time. Please and thank you.